Hello everyone and welcome to the clash you've all been waiting for. It is Magnus Carlsen versus Daniil Dubov from round 5 of this year's FIDE World Rapid Championship, and whenever these two are playing, you can be sure I will cover that game. All of their games are always spectacular, and we never miss out on any action, and this game is no different. So before we check it out, I will even show you the situation at the playing hall. Here is a short clip, some 10 seconds, just to get you into the mood for the game. And also, I find it just remarkable at how unfazed Daniil is when facing Magnus Carlsen. Of course, these are all professionals here, but I mean, just look at this. I mean, you guys probably get more excited playing your uncle than Daniil does playing Magnus. But yeah, okay, let's check it out. It's quite a beauty. So Magnus with white opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to e5 by Daniil, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. Magnus opts for the Ruy Lopez, and Daniil goes for pawn to a6. No boring Berlin, Morphy's defense. We have a6, bishop to a4, knight to f6, and pawn to d3. This is the Anderssen variation. Those of you who have seen my Morphy saga know why it's called the Anderssen variation. Pawn to b5 attacks the bishop, bishop to b3, and bishop to c5. We have pawn to c3 and pawn to d6. And while I'm on the subject of sagas, I am getting very close to beginning the Steinitz saga. I'm deeply in preparation, and well, hopefully, maybe even after this event, I will start it. We have castles by Magnus and a rook to b8. Here it's a pretty standard position, well, castles is the most popular move, pawn to h6 next most popular, and there are some other moves that are played here, but rook to b8 is almost never played. There are only a handful of games in the database with this idea, and it is what Daniil will use to try and throw Magnus off guard. We have knight b to d2, castles kingside, and the rook to e1. And now there is a game where bishop to b6 was played, but here just knight to e7, and it is now as of move 10 that we have a completely new game. Those of you who are maybe new to my channel, I always like to mention that something like knight to g4 going after the f2 pawn isn't all that impressive, because you don't have to go back rook to f1. Even though it's fine, the rook actually is very well placed on e2. So that's why you will never see this move played. And if someone plays it against you, just put your rook on e2 and, you know, feel good about yourself. Next, you can kick away the knight, and the rook will be very well placed. But okay, knight e7, completely new game. We have knight to f1 and knight to g6. We have pawn to h3 by Magnus and bishop to b6 by Daniil. So Magnus burning a bit more time. Obviously, Dubov managed in surprising him with this rook to b8 idea. Pawn to a4 challenges the structure here on the queen side. Pawn to h6. We have pawn to a5 and bishop to a7. Pawn to d4, Magnus strikes in the center, and pawn to c5, Dubov counter strikes in the center. Knight g3, a fairly standard idea. You want to get the knight to f5, where you will either have an excellent piece on f5, or you will force black to give up the bishop pair. Pawn to c4 chases Magnus's bishop further back. We have bishop to c2, and now even pawn to b4. Now, Magnus could capture on b4, but he prefers rook to a4 and pawn to b3. Attacks the bishop, bishop back to b1, and now queen to c7. We have queen to e2 by Magnus and bishop to e6. Now, there's no way to actually defend the c4 pawn, but in order to capture the c4 pawn, Magnus will have to leave the a5 pawn undefended. And this works out very well for Dubov, as his plan is to advance that pawn all the way to a3 and create a passed b pawn, since he already has it advanced all the way to b3. So bishop to e6, and Magnus grabs more space while denying the bishop access to the c4 square. d5 with bishop to d7, and he goes for it. Rook captures on c4, Daniil captures on a5, and now knight to f5. And like we've mentioned, you could allow this knight to remain here. Maybe in a classical game you would even consider it, but not for a rapid game. Dubov just captures the knight, and it's worth pointing out that yes, the rook is very weirdly placed here. But let's say we go something like bishop to c5, and after something like g3, bishop to b5. Why wouldn't Dubov play this? Well, the problem is Magnus has so much attacking potential here that if Dubov puts all of his defenders on the queen side, Magnus can just go for bishop capture captures on h6. And now look at this. Bishop captures on c4. You don't even accept the trade in terms of the exchange. You play queen to d2 and you go for checkmate. And it's almost impossible to defend this. Like, to give you an example, let's say go knight to e8 to defend the g7 pawn. Bishop captures on g7. And if knight captures queen to, if knight captures queen to h6, threatening checkmate. And how do you defend here? If you capture here, then just pawn captures, kicks away the knight, knight e7, pawn to f6, and there's no defending checkmate. Knight f5, of course, just bishop captures on f5. So there's a lot of attacking potential here, and Dubov is not the kind of guy that goes after the exchange. If anything, he gives up the exchange or just the piece itself. So bishop captures on f5, e captures, and now knight to f4, attacking the queen, inviting bishop captures on f4. This will eliminate one of Magnus's very strong attackers, that are the two bishops. Bishop captures on f4, e captures, and now rook to f1. The rook will be very useful here guarding that f2 pawn. You can never be too careful against a player like Daniil. We have rook f to e8, queen to d2, going after the f4 pawn, and now just queen captures on d5. Here, Dubov could go for knight captures on d5. It's very, very difficult to do anything about Black's position here. There's the engine gives a move like pawn to f6 to free up the light square bishop. But let's say you play something like rook to d1 just to show you how dangerous the position is. You're threatening the knight. It seems like the knight has to go back, but no knight e3, and already Black would be winning. You're attacking both of the rooks, so you're gonna win material. And if pawn captures, then bishop captures and wins the queen. So knight to e3, knight captures on d5 was a very nice idea, but queen captures on d5 was played, and Magnus goes for the queen trade. Captures, and rook to d1, attacking the knight. And this looks really, really awesome. Daniil moves the knight. Of course, Magnus wins the d6 pawn, but Daniil has something else in mind. He just plays rook to e2, and he sacrifices the knight on d5. Okay, so Magnus has to capture it. If you don't capture it, I mean, the pawn on f2 is hanging, so rook captures on d5, bishop captures on f2 with check. We have king to h1, and now rook captures on b2. So this is Daniil's idea. Okay, he's down a knight, but he has two passed pawns on the queen side. If he manages to play a5, a4, it will be two connected passed pawns on the queen side. So can he push them? Let's see what Magnus does. Rook to d1. Of course, he defends the bishop. We have bishop to e3 now. Rook to c6 goes after the d6 and the a6 pawn, pawn to a5. Daniil starts advancing that a pawn. Rook c captures on d6, and now rook to c2. A vintage Daniil move, if you will. More probably precise was just pawn to a4, pawn to a3, but this is also very nice. It locks the bishop out of the game, and of course you cannot allow captures, and then the c1 square is already defended. So Magnus goes for knight to e5. Rook to c2, while it is very impressive, it's also maybe playing a bit on Magnus's time, because they're both below the 1 minute mark. However, Magnus is winning here, but he misses it. The win is rook d8 check, rook captures with check, king h7, and pawn to f6. Now pins the rook here, and after pawn to g6, you will play king to h2. You will move the king, and now there is no good defense. Knight to e5, knight captures on f7, and rook to h8 checkmate. There's really nothing you can do about this other than suffer severe material loss. So okay, after this rook to c2 move, Magnus misses this one. He plays knight to e5 right away, probably having the same idea in mind, only through a different move order. But Daniil now stops it, rook to f8. And now rook to d8 is kind of pointless. If you go rook to d8 now, then Daniil just plays pawn to a4, and now he's the one that's winning. There's no way to force anything here. So okay, after rook f8, pawn to c4. Magnus starts advancing his own passed c pawn, and now rook to e2. Again, for some reason, Daniil dislikes advancing the a pawn. He goes for rook to e2, and now knight back to f3 by Magnus. Rook to a6, again, it's like neither of them really considers pawn to a4 to be a threat. So knight to f3, and now bishop to c5. Attacks the rook, rook to a6, and now bishop to b4. Daniil just defends the pawn, but now pawn to c5. Magnus offers the c5 pawn in order to capture the pawn on a5. We have rook to c8, putting the rook in front of the passed pawn to c6. We have king to f8. Daniil starts bringing the king into the game. King to h2. Magnus does the same, but also the king will be less vulnerable here. We have rook to e7, now planning an attack on the c6 pawn, and rook to d3, going after the b3 pawn. We have rook e to c7, and now rook... knight to e5. You could capture on b3, but then rook captures on c6, and it's not that impressive. It's better not to rush. We have knight to e5. Now the pawn is very nicely defended, and now pawn to b2. Okay, Magnus has to do something about the passed b pawn. We have rook to b6, now stopping a4 as the bishop would hang. King to e7. Daniil brings the king into the game, but rook to d7 with check. We have king to f6, of course not capturing, and now knight to g4 check. Look at this, king g5 and rook to b5, threatening f6 to come with a discovery, but just bishop to e1, threatening bishop to g3 with check. And now it's very, very hard to say who's actually attacking here. Magnus plays pawn to f6 check, opens up a discovery to the black king, king h4, and now knight to e5, but now bishop to g3 with check. We have king to g1, and now pawn to g5. Now h5, g4, and it could be Magnus who's in big trouble. Rook captures on c7, rook captures, and rook to b7. Magnus trying to create a passed b pawn, and now rook to c8. We have rook captures on f7, and now pawn to a4. Daniil starts advancing his past a pawn, but now the problem is he missed something terrible. Magnus actually has a forced checkmate in well, 3 to 4 moves depending on how you think about chess, but Magnus misses it. But just for fun, feel free to pause the video and try to solve this. It's a really nice one. You will feel very, very happy. You will feel good about yourself if you find this one. Have at it while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this beauty. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is knight to f3 with check. Only move king h5, and now comes the move you had to see. It's not easy to spot it unless you know you're looking for checkmate. Rook g7, and there's no defense against bishop to g6 checkmate. Really wild stuff. Why I said it, it changes perspective on how you view chess. You could also prolong it by one move by delivering bishop to f2 or bishop to h2 check, but yeah, I'm calling this a mate in 3. We're not gonna call it a mate in 4. But Magnus misses it. After pawn to a4, Magnus goes rook to h7. He threatens rook captures an h6 checkmate, but now Daniil plays pawn to g4, frees up the g5 square for his king, but he also missed that. Now rook captures an h6 is check, king to g5, and knight to f7 is checkmate. So he misses that one, but he finds this one as Daniil walks right into it. So yeah, a beautiful 56 move game. It could have gone either way. They were trading advantage back and forth. Daniil definitely had a great opportunity here. He played a beautiful game against Magnus Carlsen. And I mean, it's not easy for Magnus facing 2 masters of the mystic arts in a row. We've seen what Richard Rapport was able to do. What a game. And Dubov now also almost, taking down Magnus, but he missed his chance, and that was more than enough for Magnus to take the win. But it was not as great for their team because Magnus won on board 1, Nepo lost on board 2, and I believe boards 3 and 4 were drawn, and then they lost on boards 5 and 6. Katrina Lachno defeated Ho Yifan, who is the highest rated woman in the tournament, and it was a great victory for her and for the team. So they take down VR Chess, last year's winners, and we'll see. It's it's like Nepo said in an interview. They said, they asked him, how do you feel about the event? And he said that they were sort of even more humble now that they have Magnus in their team, because last year Magnus did not play for their team, but now, they were humble. Now they're even more humble. I don't know if you use the word humble, but something like that. I guess he was right. It's never a good idea to have too many superstars in one team. Then, the spotlight is not directed where it should be. Everyone is fighting for the spotlight. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, I will always cover a game when Magnus and Daniil play it. If they play 10 games in a day, I will cover all 10 of them. No questions asked. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank the animated chemist Roger Stone, Robert Arathun, Karl-Heinz Haas, and Martin Georg Paparik for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your Saturday.